that you came for Shabbat. I know it's not easy to be away from the family, but I think that you feel this is a part of the family. Family came to the family. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the generous introduction. I hope that one day what you said should be true. Bereshut, the Rosh Kollel, Rabbi Shofet, Moray, Rabotai. This is not the first time that I've been here, although it's the first time I believe that we had such a large group of people to address in the Kollel. But it is true, we have a long-standing relationship, and when I come to Los Angeles, my first stop is inevitably the Kollel, the community, the Netzach, the Siot here, Rabbi David, the three Chachmei David. Torah Chaim, Emet, and Or Emet. So it does feel like it's my home away from home. And it's always a pleasure to come and be able to see and to be able to enjoy the perot that started to grow in Iran and then continued to be nurtured in Baltimore, and then have continued to be nurtured and nurturing in Los Angeles. It's a real pleasure. Now, the topic that we're supposed to address today is the topic of dealing with teenagers. There was a famous Baal Musar, Itzel Petterberger. He was a very close student of Rabbi Yisrael Misalant. And it came to the Elul and Sarasibet Yeshiva. They asked him to say a sicha, to speak, to tell people what to do and how to be able to do tshuva appropriately, how to prepare for the Yomim Noreim. So Itzel got up and he said, I'll give you an example, a mashal, of what I feel like. He said there was once a man who was going through a forest and he got lost. He didn't know how to get out, and he's sitting and it's getting 1 hour and another hour and another hour and it's getting dark. One night he's in the forest, the next day he tries to find another. He can't get out, and it's 2 days, and it's 3 days. He tries in every direction and he can't find the way out. On the 4th day, he hears something that he thinks sounds like a human being. He gets excited and he tries to find where the noise is coming from, and sure enough he can locate it, and he goes to see who this person is. This person will be his ticket to his exit from the forest. He comes up and he sees the man like we were waiting for Mashgiach. He was waiting to see a human being that could help him get out of his forest. So he comes up to him and he says, "Oh, I'm so happy to see you. I'm so happy to meet you. I've been lost here for 3 days. Now you can tell me how to get out." He says, "My dear friend, I don't want to discourage you, but I've been here for 3 months. I'm afraid I also don't know how to get out. The only thing I can tell you is the routes that I took to take that didn't work, and that I can tell you to avoid. The right road of how to get out, unfortunately, I haven't found yet either." When it comes to parenting teenagers, I can tell you like this. There are many things that I've tried. Some with a little more success, some with a little less success. I'm still looking for the way to be successful. So if you came thinking that I'm going to give you a way to be successful and it's a sure way to do it, I'm afraid you're going to leave disappointed. I'm more than happy, though, to discuss with you what I think makes sense and what I think does work and can work, and with a lot of siyata d'shmaya, we can have a measure of success in our endeavors to bring up our teenage children. It's interesting that we're talking today because yesterday, the Medrash, in the beginning of Shemos, talks about the pasuk Chosech Shifto Sones Beno, the Ohavo Shichar Musa. Shlomo HaMelech says, Chosech Shifto, a person who spares the rod. Chosech Shifto Sones Beno, the end will come out that God forbid he'll end up hating his son, his child. The Ohavo, but a parent who loves his child, Shichar Musa, will give him every morning, every shachar, he will give him Musar. He will give him Musar. Now, you have to know that this is talking about great people. It says that David HaMelech had his two sons, Adoniyahu and Avshalom, and the pasuk says that he didn't reprimand them, and because he didn't reprimand them, they went out to Tarbut Ra'ah, they went out to on the bad path, to the point where they wanted to kill him. They wanted to kill their father. Avram didn't give Yishmael Musar, it says in the Medrash. Yitzchak didn't give Esav Musar. That's a lot of people, luminaries, giants, people that we live because of them. We're here because of them. Brought up their children in a way that didn't come out with the results that we wanted, that they wanted, or that anybody would want. It says that Yaakov Avinu, he was the one that was Mekayim, the Ohav Shichar Musar. He constantly gave rebuke to his children, and therefore they turned out to be Mitaso Shlema. His bed was complete, his children were all tzaddikim. Now, Avram Avinu was a smart man and a pious man. Yitzchak Avinu was a smart and pious man. Before Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu comes from Avram and Yitzchak. So if they had an understanding of how to bring up their children that differed, the way the Medrash says it differed from the Ohav HaShichar HaMusar, then we can believe without a question that they knew what they were doing and they had a cheshbon, they had a reason for which they did it. But the Medrash still says that it didn't turn out the way they wanted it to turn out. The Gemara says in Kedushin that even though you're supposed to rebuke your children, you're not allowed to hit a child once he's bar mitzvah. And this is a very important difference and something we have to remember. And it tells us something. A teenager is not a child. When a child becomes bar or bat mitzvah, the child is now a gadol or gedolah. And it is the obligation of the parent to prepare the child to be able to take the responsibility of the old mitzvot when they become bar or bar mitzvah. After they become bar or bat mitzvah, it's late in the game. To try to teach them, to try to rebuke them, to try to straighten them out after they've gotten no or minimal education or minimal amount of rebuke or teaching when they were before bar or bat mitzvah, it's a very, very difficult thing to do. So if we're talking about how to interact with teenagers, one of the most important rules and one of the important lessons is make sure that we're there the first 12 and 13 years, that we're part of their lives, that we're teaching them what is correct. And by the way, teaching, as we know, the poorest form of teaching is through verbal communication. The greatest form of teaching is by example. And it's no place that is clearer and no place that's more important and that we see it more clearly than in parenting. Maybe in marriage it's just as clear. But certainly in parenting, that if what we want our children to be has to be nothing more and nothing less than what we are. They will learn by our example. If we are an example that the children see as an example of integrity and an example of doing things in a correct way, they will emulate. They will want to follow the same path. If, however, they see that we talk one way, we act another way, it's not going to fly. You know, Rabbi Friend has a famous story that he tells over, and it brings out this point so beautifully. There was a child who was in school, in elementary school, and the child was sent to the principal's office after numerous times of not acting in a proper way in the classroom. Finally, the teacher couldn't deal with the child, and the principal couldn't deal with the child. They called the parents to come to the office. The parents came to the office. They said, "What's the problem?" The problem is your child lies. He doesn't tell the truth. And it's very, very disruptive, and it's disruptive for the teacher in the class, it's disruptive for the other children. You can't have children who are lying. The parents are terribly upset, very, very upset that this is what's happening. So the parents rebuke him and tell him, you're not allowed to lie. Why? Where did you learn this? And the child doesn't say anything. After the visit with the principal by the parents, it's dinner time, and the child is sitting at the dinner table with his family, and the phone rings, and the child picks up the phone, and it says someone for his father. She says, Daddy, the phone is for you. She says, tell him I'm not home. What happened to the not lying? What happened to the being honest and having integrity? The child learns whether we intend to teach him or not. He learns from our example. And that's something that we have to be very much aware of. The first 12 and 13 years are going to be the time that we need to be able to inculcate in our children that which is true and which is correct. And if they see us doing that, they see that that is important to us, then they will themselves want to emulate us, they want to act like we do. And they too will have the integrity that we would like them to have. When we're talking about once they become teenagers, we have to have a healthy respect for the child. The Medrash says in Parshas Vayetze, Medrash Rabbah, says Yaakov and Esav were growing up. Vayigdin lo hana'arim, vahi Esav ish yodei etzayid, v'Yaakov ish tamir shevahadam. So the Medrash Rabbah says that ad shloshas shana tzarach ha'av l'tapel in beno. Miyud gimel shanan va'elech tzarach loyma baruch shepatrani mi'anshe shalazeh. The bracha we're familiar with. It's a bracha that we make when our child becomes bar mitzvah. But it bothered me. I was learning this Medrash when my oldest son became bar mitzvah some 30-some years ago. And it bothered me because it says, Miyud gimel shanim va'elech tzarech lama baruch shepatrani mi'anshe shalazeh. It should say, not from 13 years and on. It should say, until 13 years, a father is obligated to teach his child. And from 13, and when he becomes 13 years and a day, he should say, Baruch Shepatrani Mi'anshe shalazeh. When he becomes bar mitzvah, that day he should say, Baruch Shepatrani, like we do. What does the Medrash mean by saying, Yud Gimel Shanim Va'elech Tzarech Lama Baruch Shepatrani Mi'anshe shalazeh? From every day, from the time he becomes 13 on, I'm supposed to say Baruch Shepatrani. What does that mean? I'll tell you what I think it means. It means that our whole relationship to the child has to change. It's not just a question of saying a bracha once. It means that until 13 years old, I take the responsibility for educating my child and trying to bring him up or her up to be upright citizens, Torah citizens. That's until they're 13 or 12. But when they become bar or bat mitzvah, they have to learn that their responsibility for their actions is their own. It's squarely on their shoulders. No longer are the parents to shoulder the responsibility. And therefore, what the Medrash is saying is, yes, literally you only say the bracha once, when the child becomes bar mitzvah. But in terms of the interaction that the parent has with the child, it has to be Yud Gimel Shanim Va'elech. I have to change my whole rapport with my child. I have to let him know and let her know, you are now responsible for yourselves. And it's not an easy task, because we've been doing it for 13 years or 12 years. We've been living one way from the time that the child came home from the hospital, right? Up days and nights, taking care of the child. And then working with the child all the 12 and 13 years. Suddenly we're supposed to change. I think that's why they made the takana of a bracha. When the child first acts like a bar mitzvah, he reads the Torah, or he davens for the Yom, and he's a shliach tzibur. At that time, when he's making a public pronouncement of his becoming an adult, the father then has to make a public pronouncement, Baruch Shepatrani Mi'anshe shalazeh, I'm accepting upon myself the fact that my son is now an adult, and I will no longer take responsibility for his actions. I think that's the whole point that's underlying that bracha. It allows for the parent to do something publicly that will help them transition out of the old way of relating and transition into a new way. Now the new way is complicated. We have to respect the child. We have to treat him like an adult. At the same time, we need to make sure that we don't cut off our communication. Our means of communication has to be even greater than it was when the child was younger. Because a child, when they become a teenager, goes through a fearful time. It's not yet an adult, it's what we call a young adult. The child is no longer a child, not yet a full adult. According to Torah, he is though. According to Torah, when he becomes 13 or the girl becomes 12, they become fully adults. But obviously the Torah also understands that there's such a thing as human nature. And a child can't change in a moment and suddenly go from being totally irresponsible to becoming totally responsible, and now they can do everything that they're supposed to do. It doesn't happen. That's not human nature. The Rebbeinu Shalom knows human nature, and Chazal know human nature better than we do. So we have to understand that there needs to be an allowance for the child. Yes, you're allowed to make a mistake. We were all children, remember? We were children and young adults, and then God helped us, we became adults. We got to this point. It wasn't easy. If we think back, it wasn't easy. What we had wasn't easy. Each one of us in our unique way, in our own specific difficulties that we had to contend with, but there are things that we had to contend with. And one of the major things is not being yet a full adult to understand and to really be able to act in a responsible way, and at the same time not being a child anymore. So as a parent, I have to give the child the respect of being an adult, because the Torah considers them an adult. At the same time, not to be foolish enough to think that the child can do everything on their own. I have to be there. I have to be there in order to be able to have the child come and ask me, or come and discuss with me, or come and share his doubts or his confusion that teenagers go through. There's much more confusion that teenagers go through than spite. As parents, we oftentimes think that the children are either brainless or they're spiteful, and that's why they do what they do. It's neither. The children are usually totally mivulbal. They're mixed up. They don't know themselves what they should be doing. Part of them wants to do one thing, another part of them wants to do another thing, and they don't know. They don't know what to do, what's right, and how to contend with this difficulty. We need to be there for them, and we need to tell them, you know, there's an introduction to becoming a teenager. There's an introduction to becoming a young adult. And that's for parents to share with their children their own difficulties that they had when they were young adults. The child should know there's nothing wrong with them. They're perfectly normal, they're perfectly fine. And it's fine to feel that you have confusion. That is what growing up is all about. We become confused because we suddenly become thrown into a different world. And we're supposed to be responsible too. Well, I'm happy to discuss it with you. If there's anything you want to talk about, I'm happy to discuss it with you. The lines of communication have to be open in a very clear way, and not to be judgmental with the children before the child. If you expect the child to be able to be open with me at all, with the parent at all, it's going to have to be on the basis of the child seeing that the parents are not being judgmental, the parents are being understanding, the parents are being sympathetic and empathetic. That doesn't mean that I encourage behavior which is incorrect. That doesn't even mean that I accept behavior which is incorrect. But like we said yesterday, I am very entitled to be critical of an act that my child does. I'm not entitled to be critical of my child for the act that he does. Criticize the act, absolutely. There are many things that we all do that deserve to be criticized, that are not appropriate and not correct. But how would we feel if somebody came over and criticized me because of an act that I did? Unfortunately, it happens all too often, but it doesn't feel good, does it? And we're adults. Children certainly are sensitive to this, and young adults especially so sensitive to this. So we have to make sure that the child understands, I respect you, I respect that you are a young adult, I respect that you now understand more than you did as a child. I'm going to give you your room to do things the way you understand them, but please understand, I'm not abandoning you. I'm not abandoning you. I'm going to be here for you and with you. You have the responsibility to shoulder, to do the way you understand. My responsibility is to be here for you. And I intend to be carrying out my end of my responsibilities while you're carrying out your responsibilities. This is the message that parents want to give teenage children. I'm here for you. I understand that you're going through a difficult time. I also went through a difficult time when I was your age. It's perfectly normal, but you know that you have the ability to discuss with me whatever you want, whenever you want. I'm not going to push myself on you. I'm not going to force you into a discussion that you're uncomfortable with. It's up to you. You make the decision of if and when you want to discuss anything. I want you to know that I'm here for you. I want you to know that I'm here for you, I'm thinking of you, and you have my support and my understanding for what you're going through right now. And I have full confidence that you will weather the storm and you will come out an adult that is a very well-balanced adult and a person who has the integrity that you have had until now and that the Torah wants every Jewish man and woman to have. So we want to give the children space, not to be on top of them, as tempting as it is to tell the child, even after they become bar mitzvahs, for what to do, when to do, and how to do. It doesn't work. And to be critical of them also doesn't work. I remember an example we had at my house with one of our daughters, who's now the mother of like 5 children, I think. So she was when she was a teenager. It was one night they had a vacation of some sort, and she was sitting in the kitchen bemoaning the fact that she has a test tomorrow and she didn't study for it. So my wife, who happens to be a PhD psychologist, said, now's a fine time to wake up about that. So my daughter said, for a psychologist and a mother, that was a pretty dumb statement to make. Now, my wife, I understand 100%. We all do that. We all respond. We have knee-jerk responses when children put themselves in unreasonable situations. And this is one of them. They don't do their homework, they push it off, they procrastinate, and then afterwards it comes and it's too late already. The temptation is overwhelming. But as parents, we need to think enough to be able to take that temptation and not succumb to it. And be in control of myself to whatever extent I can be, not to say that. Because my daughter is as right as my wife was, and she knows that she was right. And my daughter knew that she was right. But saying it doesn't make it any better. It doesn't help the situation. So being right doesn't help. I think it was the Tzedek said once, you can be happy, you can be right, take your choice. He was talking about in all areas of life. It's true in marriage, it's true in parenting, it's true in business, it's true in everything, in all relationships. We can be happy or we can be right. What's the big deal of being right? It's much more important to be happy. It says, Rav Nachman of Breslov says, don't be afraid. You want to be happy, a person needs to be besimcha. If there was Hashem besimcha, begilu berada, you need to be besimcha. A person needs to be able to know that they have simcha, that we have simcha in our life. And simcha, by the way, I always say that simcha means clarity, not only being happy, but it means clarity, because clarity gives happiness. When we have a certain clarity in what we're doing and what we want, what our mission is and what our goal is, we have that clarity, that allows for us to be able to have true simcha. When we don't have clarity, when we're mivulbal, when we're mixed up, then clarity evades us. We can't have simcha, we can't have happiness. We can't have happiness if we don't have things straight. So, my grandmother, my mother's mother used to say, people know that we have to learn how to do everything, except from being married and having children. That everybody suddenly is an expert on. Everybody's an expert in marriage and everybody's an expert in parenting. Doesn't begin to be true. This is chachma hiveinu malacha. Parenting is a chachma. It's something we have to learn. Being a doctor is also a chachma. Being an accountant and a lawyer is also a chachma. Being a rav is a chachma. Being a parent is also a chachma. Being a spouse is also a chachma. It's something we have to learn. And that's why I was very, very happy when the Rosh Kollel asked me to speak on this topic, because that means that there's a recognition that parenting is a chachma. Parenting is something we have to learn how to do. We're not born knowing how to do it. And we have to know, not only we have to know how to do it, we have to know how to implement what we know to be true. So I think it's important for all of us, and I include myself. Rav Ruderman used to say, little children, in Yiddish there's an expression, kleine Kinder tragen auf der Hand, große Kinder tragen auf der Kopf. Little children you carry in your hands, big children you carry in your head. And anybody who's got a child who's older, more than Bar Bas Mitzvah, knows exactly what he was talking about. And it's true as can be. So it's never too late. It's never too late to be able to improve and our understanding of what parenting can be and should be, and how to be able to implement that which we understand. Because we need to be able to be there for our children. Our children is our future. Our children is the future for Klal Yisrael, as well as the future of ourselves as individuals. Nothing is more important than the future of Klal Yisrael and the future of our Jewish families. We need to work on this. We need to be able to become better at it. There's no such thing as being perfect at anything. We're not perfect people, we're not perfect husbands, we're not perfect spouses, we're not perfect parents. We're not perfect. Don't aim for perfection. If you aim for perfection, you're aiming for heartbreak. You're aiming for disappointment. Aim for improvement. Aim to try to improve. A little bit at a time. Rabbi Shlomo Salant said, even when it comes to tshuva, when you want to do tshuva to the Almighty, we owe the Almighty everything that we have, everything that we are. We owe Him everything. And we don't necessarily act in accordance the way we should. He says, even when it comes to tshuva, take little steps. Take little things that you know that you can do and hold on to it. Don't try to take big things. You're going to be disappointed. Inevitably, you're going to become upset and give up on the whole process of doing anything too much or too quickly. Parenting is a perfect example of such a thing. Don't have great expectations. Have expectations that you're going to be as good as you can be right now. Right now, I'm going to be as good as I can be. I have how many times we have personality conflicts with our own children? Not that we don't love them. We love them dearly. But there are some children that press our buttons and that we have difficulty in interacting with. We have difficulty in being there for them. Work on it. Don't expect it to become perfect overnight. It's not going to. But address the issue. You know that it's an issue, address it. Deal with it. Speak to someone that can be helpful. Oftentimes, speaking to a professional can be helpful. Professional includes a Rav, a Rebbe, someone that knows you, someone that knows a child. These are professionals. It can also include a counselor, a therapist, a psychologist. Also, in the right situation, these are all very, very important. Social worker, very important. To know how to utilize them. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. There's nothing wrong. There's everything right with taking the responsibility for trying to improve my parenting skills, like it's trying to improve all the other skills that I have. You are all here now trying to improve our learning skills. That's very important. Learning Torah is essential. But it's also very important to improve all our other skills, because we have many, many different facets to our lives. And we have many responsibilities in our lives. We want to try to improve them all. It's not going to happen in a day, it's not going to happen in a week or a month. But improvement can be made immediately. Just addressing the issue and trying to get help and trying to become improving in my different areas of responsibility is in and of itself the greatest opportunity for growth that we have at our disposal. May Hashem Yisbarach bless us all, that we should be successful, number one, in recognizing that we need to do something, and number two, getting the proper advice and being able to implement it. If there's some questions that you want to be asked, yes.
I was wondering if you can give me your thoughts on teenagers. I mean, I'm already 21, but I see a lot of people in the community that, the halakha has a lot of limitations on what a person can do, and I feel that we pretty much cage our teenagers and inhibit them a lot, but we don't tell them why.
Okay.
And I feel like once they become 21 once they are no longer in the realm of their parents, it doesn't make a difference on this inhibition, it just makes it worse.
Okay.
So I was wondering what your advice is on this, how to handle a teenager, how to send them in the right direction.
Okay, it's a very complicated question you just asked.
I think it's a very necessary question.
It is
But one that's not addressed at all.
it is very necessary. I mean, complicated in terms of there are many aspects of what you just asked. But let me just try to answer briefly. Number one, a person could look at all of Torah as being very restrictive, and you would have a hard time arguing with that. On the other hand, you could take a look at the Torah and say, it's directive, it's not restrictive. It's directing you in how to be able to utilize the many different strengths that you have and how to help you deal with the frustrations you have. We have a mistaken notion. The mistaken notion is that if we are free to do anything we want, we're better off than if we have restrictions, if we have direction. My father, blessed memory, used to say, there's nothing freer than a souped-up car that has no brakes. Nothing freer. Not very safe. If you're interested in the person's well-being, you're not going to put him in that kind of a vehicle. You won't let anybody go in that vehicle. Why not? It's free. You're free to go any speed you want. And there's nothing holding you back. There are no brakes. A human being is not worse than a car. And not better than a car.
The problem is, how do you implement this methodology in a teenager? That when he lives in this Western society, he's not thinking that way. He's not thinking
You
that
could
way.
have stopped after the first. You could have stopped after the first 2 words. He's not thinking. Because usually, teenagers, as much as they begin to understand more, and they do get to be in a position of responsibility that the Torah gives them, it takes time to be able to grow into the position completely. They're large shoes that we have to fill. But the thing that I think that we have to keep in mind, both the parents and the teenagers, is 2 things. Number one, if the only part of Torah that you're encountering is the restrictive part of Torah, you're missing the most of the Torah. Torah needs to be taught and needs to be lived as a living Torah, as a Torah that gives me pleasure and gives me understanding, which in and of itself is another pleasure, and it gives me a direction in my life. Part of the greatest frustration that human beings experience is being directionless. They have no idea where they're going, they have no idea how they're going to get there. They don't know anything about where they want to be ending up. If you're talking about frustration, that's frustration. If you have to pay a small price to be able to have your direction and to know what it is and to be able to carry it out and get there, then it's worth it. If the restrictions that Torah gives us are the price that we pay to be able to get to the direction where we want to get to and to get to the end mission of where we want to get to, it's a small price to pay. But I agree with you. If all you are seeing is restrictions, then it's a problem.
I'm not saying me, I'm just saying a teenager.
I'm talking any individual.
And a teenager doesn't care about direction.
That's true. But if they're brought up in the first 12, 13 years, that there are certain things that we do and they're enjoyable. A Shabbos is enjoyable. It can be looked at as being a very restricted day, but it can be looked at as a very enjoyable day. An experience is a very enjoyable day. You could look at the same thing Yom Tov, the same thing Kashrus, the same thing, all the halachas that we have. You could look at them as being very restrictive, and you could look at them as being things which give us a tremendous amount of sense of well-being and help us to get where we want to go. We don't feel that we're flailing all over the place, not knowing where we're going and not having any way to get there. Right? So it can be a very, very, but it has to be given over that way. It has to be lived that way. Parents have to live it that way. If children see, I think Rav Moshe Feinstein Zechron Lebracha once said that there were many children who grew up in homes that were religious homes. They grew up to be not religious. When they left the house, they became unreligious. And there were many families, they grew up in religious homes and they stayed religious. He said, he thinks that the difference was that when it came to Shabbos and everybody was challenged with, is the father going to have a job the next week or not? Because in those days, the blue laws were very strictly enforced. So there were those homes where they said, "Oi, it's hard to be a Jew. It's hard to be a Jew. The kid hears that week in, week out. So what does he want it for?" We were walking yesterday. I was walking yesterday with Rabbi Chacham Zadeh, and a man speaking Ivrit and standing in front of his house, and he's telling us, Asur liot Charidim. So I don't know who he's talking to. I guess he met Rabbi Chacham Zadeh. I don't know. He says, Asur liot Charidim. I said, Lama? He said, because he went through the Holocaust. And he holds that because Jews were Charidim, that's why there was a Holocaust. I wasn't going to get into a discussion with him. Anybody who went through the Holocaust can say whatever they want. The fact that there's any semblance of normalcy is a miracle there. But the truth is, that doesn't begin to be true. Charidim is not what it was. Remember, the Germans, when they wanted to make the total annihilation, bring about the total annihilation of the Jewish people, they didn't care if you were Jewish or not. They cared if you weren't, if your mother wasn't Jewish, they didn't care if your father was Jewish. That was enough to make you a Jew. They didn't care about who you were or what you were, whether you were religious or not religious. They wanted to wipe out the Jewish people. So this man should live and be well till 120, and he should. But it's just not true. Many times we hear this, and it's a lie. On the contrary, the people that have the integrity to carry out the Torah to the best of their ability are the people that have the respect of everybody in the world. They may hate us for it. Halacha b'yadua Esav soneis Yaakov. It's true that Esav hates Yaakov. He's jealous of him, and to this day that's still true. But at least they have to respect us for having a sense of integrity and being righteous in our own way. That they have to respect, and they do. Yes?
I think relating to what you said about the Holocaust survivor, if you read Machshmo's speeches, you'll see the anger is leading toward the secular Jews, that they try to be like Jews, and among the intellectuals and the artists and the people who were in the forefront of theater, they were very resentful of Jews who were really essentially being in the forefront. This is really what bothers them. They did not mind the Jews who were in the shtetl doing their own business. They really were threatened where it was really infringing upon them. And also the Jews were really living very comfortably, and they were very jealous of them with all the wealth that they had somehow. But you want to say something, but that's not what I wanted to say.
No, so please say what you wanted to say.
And somewhat dovetails in reverse about the Frum Jews these days. I think they are somehow threatened the other way around by the secular or the modern psychology that somehow is infringing on our Torah words. And in many regards, I see that the Torah Judaism somehow deferring to them and somehow trying to work with them and to live with them because they cannot really deny it. And I think you are very qualified having a wife that she is a therapist, that I'm sure she was, if she's somehow in your age, she was essentially indoctrinated by the dominant forces of what Freud was essentially propagating, which about up until the late 70s, no psychologist, therapist worth his salt would say anything that was not congruent with his advocacy, which is essentially children have all the rights and not much responsibility. And somehow I feel that the Torah Judaism values are really morphing to be congruent with this formidable advocacies that are somehow foreign to our pure Judaism.
So I'll tell you two things I'm going to answer you. Number one, I agree with you wholeheartedly that what the Umoto Olam, the Gentile world, resents about the Jewish world far more than the Frum Jew is the one who tries to beat them at their own game. As if you want to dress like me and do your own thing and be a rabbi and not go into the business world and not try to compete with them in any which way, they'll respect that. That's okay. They may hate me anyways, but they won't feel that I'm trying to beat them at their own game. What gets them, and it's still true today, is when you try to beat them at their own game. You want to have Shabbat, you want to have Yom Tov, you want to have to go to Tfilot, you want to do all of that you want to do, but that you want. But you want to beat me at my game, and you want to be there, you want to get a better job than me and get more. that burns them up. You want to put yourself out of the running? Be my guest. I might hate you anyways, but at least you're not taking my job. You're not competing with me, so I don't have to worry about you. But if you do that and that is absolutely true. As far as the other thing, let me tell you, and I'm sure you know this, or if you know enough to be able to formulate that statement and question, I'm sure you appreciate this also. You know that Einstein's theory of relativity is coming under attack. And Freud is passé. Now, it is true that till 15, 20 years ago, Freud was God in the psychological world. And I'll tell you what my wife did do. My wife is as smart as the rest of the people, and she would come home every night from school, and she would, if there was something that was said in class, she would discuss with me or with her father what was said in school, and she said, I know this is wrong, let's discuss it.
And she would drive her teachers crazy.
She ignored them. They weren't going to take it seriously. They were indoctrinated, and they had no reason not to accept it, not to swallow it whole. She had a reason. She is a smart and religious person, and she wasn't going to swallow this whole just because they. But I just want to give you an example of something which is seemingly contradictory to the Torah, but it was not. My father-in-law of blessed memory, Rav Weinberg, Yachad Weinberg, who used to be very, very close to the community here, and he often spoke here. So he once asked a very, very special question to me. He asked, you know that there was a gentleman called B.F. Skinner. I don't know if he was a gentleman or not. I know he was a man. But a fellow B.F. Skinner, and he was the father of behaviorism. That's a whole school of thought in psychology. Now, he proposed, and he proved it through time and again, that if you told him what a person was like, he could tell you with great accuracy, not 100%, but 80%, maybe 75, 80%, what this person will choose to do and what he will not choose to do. That's called behaviorism. So they did it with an example. They did it with mice on a grill, and if the one grill had electric going through the grill, and the mouse got burned, so it wouldn't go there again, and it kept on going, and the other one that didn't have any electricity running through it. So he said the same thing as a human being. If you know what their experiences have been and what their likes and dislikes are, you'll be able to project what they're going to do and what they won't do.
You're a product of your experience.
You're right. So, Weinberg asked, what about Bechira? That seems to fly in the face of Bechira. It's an example of what you were discussing. So he said, not at all. And I think you'll appreciate the answer. You know why it's not? Yes, Rav Shofet.
Concerning your teaching, how much a parent they should rely on psychologists? Those days, most of the parents, they go to psychologists and they don't go to rabbi. And how much we have to listen to them, how much they are accurate, how much you can see the contradiction between these two fields.
I can see.
How, you know, not everybody is like your Rabbanit. She's in both. Most of the psychologists, they don't believe anything in religion. You know, how a parent, they should listen to who?
Okay, that's a very good question. I would just want to, if I may, just bring the answer of Weinberg said, and then I want to answer what Rabbi Shofet to try to respond. Weinberg said, know why Bechira exists, even with behaviorism? Because people can choose not to choose. It's the path of least resistance, right? That people take. People will take the thing that comes easiest to them. So that is what Skinner is basing it on. He's basing it on the fact that most of the time people choose not to choose. But it's not a stira to Bechira. There is Bechira. And the proof is because sometimes people will, despite the fact that they would be easier for them not to, they will still do the thing which is more difficult for them. I choose that there is still is Bechira. And now, in terms of what Rabbi Shofet is bringing up is a very, very important point. Unfortunately, people are people. And we all have our predispositions, and we all have our things that we'd like to believe are true, and things that we need to believe are true. And that, if we don't try to neutralize that, if we don't try to become objective in specific areas, specific issues, we're not going to be objective, we will be subjective. So if I, for instance, believe that everybody should drive a black car, then you could believe anybody is going to come and discuss it with me, what the merits and demerits of having a car is. I'm going to put in there that you have to have a black car. Why? Because I think that it's right. If somebody believes that a person should not be religious, you'd better believe that that's going to be part of their therapy. That in their therapy, they're going to push that because they have that as that's what they believe. In choosing a therapist, you need to be very, very careful. Because there are therapists that have integrity, and I've dealt with therapists, Jewish, non-Jewish, religious, not religious, and I found that you have, amongst all of them, some people do have integrity, some people who have worked out their own negiot, that they know that they have negiot, they know that they have certain, certain tendencies and certain things that they believe are correct, even though it's not based on anything that they can show is absolutely true. And there's some people who will not. So like any other profession, in every profession we have people who have more greater sense of integrity and objectivity and will look to find out what's true and share that truth with the people who come to discuss with them. And there's some people who are not. They just have, their minds are made up, don't confuse them with the facts, and that's the way it goes. So yes, it is exceedingly important. Usually I send people to therapists. And I will usually call the therapist that I believe that I have confidence in, and I will discuss the case with the therapist, with the permission of the person, obviously, and discuss it with the therapist and see if the person believes that they're the right person for it.
It's very hard to find because 85% of the tenured therapists, professors, they don't believe in God, and this is what they advocate very aggressively. That's what
they're not worth their soul.
Yeah,
I don't care if they're tenured or not tenured, but they're not worth their soul as a therapist because they have no integrity.
That's what
they have their own agenda and they're pushing their agenda, and that's what Rabbi Shofet was talking about. They're pushing their agenda, and you have to stay away from them like from a plague. Because I don't care. My wife told me a situation she had with a young child many, many years ago. This goes back maybe 30-some years ago, and the child was seen by someone at Hopkins, a big, big name in therapy. And this person wanted the child to be hospitalized, said that the child will never become anything. Okay? My wife knew this child and said, baloney. And she stood up to this therapist, this world-renowned therapist, and said, it's not true. I'm telling you, he'll be okay. He needs to have certain things worked out. And today, he's a proud father and wonderful husband and a very productive individual in the community. You can't bring the spoil from a person because he's got tenure, or because he's got degrees, or because he's got a practice which can be a tremendously large practice. You can't be spoiled by that. You need to know the person and see whether the person has that integrity. Because the bigger the person is, oftentimes they become full of themselves. They can't make a mistake. They're absolutely, and they can't. The same doctors that won't accept a second opinion. If you go for a second opinion, then you're threatening their abilities. And if a doctor is secure within themselves, like, be my guest. Because anybody that has any seichel would say, I would also go for a second opinion. The doctor himself would go to a second opinion. So why should we grudge your patient if it's to go for a second opinion? It's not saying anything against you. Just everybody sees things differently, and sometimes people see something the other one didn't see. It's human. To human is error. To error is human. And we're all humans. If any time we start thinking we're God, we're in trouble. We're not infallible. Yes?
Okay,